Hello, I'm Liz Lumley of Finextra, and today I'm speaking to Brendan Farrell of SunGard's XSP, and we're going to talk about corporate actions processing. So I wanted to start off with, corporate actions processing. What are some of the unique challenges that are related to corporate actions, and how can they be sort of addressed and measured and identified?
I think one of the biggest challenges that we deal with automating corporate actions or processing corporate actions in general is the fact that they're a complete unknown. So most events are not pre-published. We don't know they're coming. We don't know the size of the risk associated with these various events.
Isn't that interesting? I think most people think of corporate actions as something that is known.
No, you can make assumptions on things like will a dividend be paid, but something like a rights issue, a merger that happens it's an unknown till it happens. A cash stock option, the actual terms of that event are completely unknown. So a lot of the events are not pre-scheduled publications. So what happens is they show up through a newspaper or from a custodian feed, or they end up from a vendor feed coming in. And at the time you receive it is the first time you know about it. So it makes it really, really hard to staff accordingly when you don't know the impact you're going to have in your operations on a daily basis. It makes it tremendously risky when you don't know what the impact of these events are going to be on your accounts, on your positions, it makes it very, very hard to automate the workflow around that. However, from our perspective, that may be a good thing because that's the niche that we've specialized in all these years, is automating that process. I think that the only way to be able to manage the risk factors around corporate actions is to have very solid workflow automation tools in place that eliminates the need to be people intensive in the processing on the front end, and also eliminates the need to worry about the risk associated with misidentifying or misprocessing an event. Because the other risk factor that we're dealing with the corporate actions process is not only the unknowns about the event, but each event itself is completely unique. So you make a mistake on understanding what the event is actually telling you, and you can have a very expensive downstream process when you misprocess the event, you misnotify your customers, you misinstruct your custodians because you didn't understand the event. So automation allows you to at least shore up much of that process. It also allows you to move the volume events out of the day-to-day process. Volume events to me are things like dividends. There are lots of dividends. There are less risky events, but they take a lot of manpower. If you automate the process around the less risky and manual events, you can then spend more time having your staff focus on the handling of these exceptional and complicated events, the unknown events I just described earlier.
So my next question looks a little bit more at some of the tools to help automate the corporate actions processing. What about a software as a service solution? What are some of the benefits to customers for going down that route?
I feel strongly that the software as a service offerings are changing the entire dynamics of a corporate actions offering. I've been doing this for way too long. I actually had hair when I started doing this process. And traditionally, a corporate actions project meant you had to have a project team, you had to have a very large budget, it was a long-term commitment, there was a lot of implementation required. And it itself was a risky proposition. Would I be able to successfully complete that long-term project within budget and get the results from a savings and a risk reduction that I expected? Software as a service changes everything. It allows you to subscribe to an offering with no deployment required, much less risk as regards technology. It's all web-based, it's all cloud-based. So a customer can come in and subscribe and pay for what they need as they need it, can get up and running really, really quickly. We're seeing results in 30 to 60 days of customers going into production, as opposed to the historical horror stories of multi-year projects that went on and on and on. So I think it takes the risk out of the process for the people making the decision, and allows the customer to have access to just what they need when they need it, and solves all the problems in my mind that the large-scale deployed solutions tried to solve over the last 25 years.
We're going to finish off our conversation about corporate actions in the U.S. by talking about the Corporate Actions Transformation Initiative from the DTCC. I'm wondering if you can give some insight on that from your end.
For the United States, we feel that it's going to be a game-changing event. I consider the United States as being an emerging market when we talk about SWIFT. Europe has adopted SWIFT very early on. The United States, except for the larger players, have not really adopted SWIFT to the same extent that Europe has.
I think SWIFT agrees with you on that.
I know they do. So why I think is a game changer is that there's multiple things happening here at one time. The D2C transformation will somewhat force the industry to start using 20.022 messaging, which is the newest format of SWIFT messaging that's out there. Prior to this, the United States, my belief, one of the reasons that they didn't automate for SWIFT earlier on was they couldn't communicate with the largest depository they dealt with. So when all the securities are held for North America at the ECC and you can't communicate via SWIFT, then automating a SWIFT process to handle the peripheral securities you're dealing with globally was less important. And most of the mid-size, even the smaller tier 1 firms, would rely on a global custodian to take care of that for them anyhow. Now, when these organizations have the opportunity to really have a straight-through process with your communication with the DTCC, where the securities are held, that will now move, I think, the large majority of the US firms into the SWIFT space, which I think will then have them look at the rest of their process. What else can we use SWIFT for to automate this process, communicating with the custodians, for example. And from that, we'll see tremendous increase in the levels of straight-through processing within the Americas. And I also think that that will be part of the impetus to move the industry. It won't be fast, but it'll be part of the impetus to move the industry towards 20.022 processing, and hopefully at some point migrating away from 15.022 onto a single standard, because it's hardly ideal to have two standards in the industry, 15.022 and 20.022 for a long period of time.
Excellent. It seems like 2014 is Corporate Action's finally their year to get it together.
Well, I thought that the final year for Corporate Actions was 1996, so I've obviously missed it, so I hope you're right this time. But I think that with the change in technology around software as a service that you mentioned, the ability for the United States to now communicate with DTCC using SWIFT-enabled messaging like 20.022, with the absolute focus at every level in the organizations of managing risk and remaining compliant, I think that the wave is moving towards a more automated corporate actions process, and we definitely see that today with our sales in our products today.
Excellent. Brendan, thank you very much.
Thank you.